Joining me from Sylvania, Northwest Ohio, involuntary life coach, someone who tells us all that we do own our own future, entrepreneur, author, and originally a ditch digger at 15. Ken Rusk, thank you very much indeed for joining.
Appreciate it. Glad to be here.
I shortchanged you dramatically on my introduction. Would you be so kind as to do a better job for my listeners?
Well, I guess I've been accused of being called a blue-collar entrepreneur or whatever that is. And it's real simple. When I was younger, I had part-time jobs like anybody. I had worked at a bowling alley. I was worked at a bakery shop when I was 12 and 13, had a newspaper route. All those things. And then at some point, I realized that I could trade like my labor for things that I wanted for myself. I grew up in a very small house with 4 brothers in Ohio, and my parents could give us what they could, but if we wanted more than that, it was up to us to go get it on our own. And I learned early on, if I wanted that new aluminum baseball bat or a bicycle, I could work hard and go get it and make that happen with working for in various jobs to earn money to do that. But I got serious when I was 15, and I said, okay, I need my first used car. Want to take my girlfriend out for pizza. I would go bowling with my buddies, whatever. And so my high school shared a fence with an industrial park. And there was a hole in that fence that we used to cut through to go to the carryout after school. And going through these businesses, I always noticed there was a lot of energy, and there was, big boy toys. There was tow motors and end loaders and dump trucks and all this kind of stuff, construction stuff, which I liked. So I knocked on the door. I knew someone that worked there, and I said, "What do you guys do?" And they said, "Well, we're ditch diggers." And I said, "Well, I'm wholly qualified to do that." So I signed on at 15, dug ditches into summertime, worked in the office in the wintertime after school because it was convenient for me. And then what happened was when I was 18, they said, "Do you want to help us? Because we're opening franchise offices around the Midwest." So instead of going to college, I pieced together a suit and lived out of a suitcase for about 4 or 5 years in Chicago and Pennsylvania, Columbus, and opened up these businesses from scratch, literally from the ground up. And I'm 18 years old and I'm doing this. So it was a pretty cool experience. So when I got tired of doing that, I moved to Toledo, Ohio, in a little town called Sylvania, Northwest Ohio, in 1986. And I opened up my own company and started with 6 people. And I think we have over 200 today. So it's been a heck of a ride. So
you got that opportunity. This is a thing that I think you can dig a little around, is that somebody gave you the opportunity. You were there, you showed your worth, you showed your value, and somebody recognized. What was that all about?
I think the biggest thing for me was I had kind of like 2 mentors, if you will. One of them was my father, and my father was a guy that worked very, very hard and slowly rose up in success. He wasn't really real successful till I was about 16. But I got to see how hard he worked. I called him the imperfect perfectionist because he drove me. He was a United States Marine, so he drove my brothers and I to do things perfectly, whether it's shining shoes or washing your car or whatever. And I saw how his work ethic was, and I thought, okay, if he can do that, I can do it. And that's basically what he told us. So if you pair him up with my first boss, who was kind of the opposite of my father. He was successful too, but he was a real playboy. He lived like a rock star. And I got to immerse myself in helping him buy cars and boats and helping him throw his parties. And it was really an interesting way to grow up, if you think about it. And so for me, I got to see some examples of a couple different ways to be successful and live well and be a good family man and that kind of thing. So it was, I think everyone should have a mentor, and I think you should be very careful how you pick them because they can either be good for you or bad for you. But these 2 gentlemen were the people that I think at least set the stage for me to say, okay, I'm going to picture what I want my life to look like. I'm going to write it down. I'm going to draw it out. I'm going to create an actual brochure for Ken Rusk and his life. And I did that. And then I slowly just took each piece of it and chopped it into little pieces and parts and hit these goals and pathways one at a time. And I've never stopped doing it. I started thinking that way when I was 23, and I've never stopped since.
Now, in your book, Blue Collar Cash, you talk about the idea of visualization, setting clear goals. And the name of this podcast is The Practical, right? So we're trying to make it practical, trying to make it useful so somebody can take things away and say, gosh, Ken gave me this really good idea. Can you share maybe some practical strategies that a leader or an individual could help to set and achieve something that's like a meaningful?
Well, first off, if you're leading people, the first thing you have to do is you have to get them together individually and say, why are you here? I need to know what you want your life to look like. I mean, Paul, why would you ever hire, if you think of the human that you hire, a typical human being, there's 24 hours in a day. 8 hours of that day they're sleeping, 8 hours of that day they're working for you, and the other 8 hours of that day they're doing something else. Okay. Well, know what that is. What's their sport? What's their hobby? What's their family? What's their charity? What's their spiritual? What's their vacation? I mean, know those things, because why would you ever hire just 1/3 of that person? Why wouldn't you want all of them? So I say, let's find out what everyone in your organization wants for themselves first. Help them to be selfish. And I don't mean at the detriment of somebody else. Help them to work on themselves, because no one does that. They're just, here's your uniform. Here's your time you go to work. Here's your health insurance. Here's your time, your days off. Here's where you call in sick. I mean, it's the most mundane interaction in the world. So if you get to somebody and say, I need to know who you think you are, I need to know who you want to be, I need to know what you want your life to look like, and I want you to draw it out crystal clearly, not only for yourself, but for me and everybody else to see, because there is power in collective vision. There's power in reticular activating systems. There's power in the ability to say, the more I stare at something, the more I begin to own it mentally. And then my brain kicks my body into this almost involuntary chase of the acquisition of that thing. And that is a power that nobody teaches, not in high school. Parents don't teach it. Colleges certainly don't teach it. They teach you how to react to things, but they don't teach you how to proact. And that is the whole spice of life, is to be able to see things, go after them, anticipate them, and then have them come into your life, because you've just kind of like brought them into your mind first and then into the world second. So I would tell any leader, get out of the way, make yourself as irrelevant to your business as you can, as quickly as you can, by finding out what everybody else wants within inside your organization, and then let them do it. Because when you empower people like that, they will take your company way further than you can take it yourself. I promise you.
I love that. I absolutely love that. The whole concept of not hiring 1/3 of a person, that's great. The reticular activation, that's the pink Volkswagen, right? You think of a pink
Absolutely.
Volkswagen. Well, I'm going to think, I'm thinking of buying a pink Volkswagen. Guess what you're going to see every day from now on? Did you know how many pink Volkswagens there are? And then you've got the idea of it's like an affirmation, as you write down what it is you want, and you look at it, or you write it every day, or you bring it to mind, you're pulling it. It pulls you forward.
Well, there's been studies, Paul, which I think are really interesting. So a study at Virginia Tech, they had 100 people, and they said, raise your hand if you have crystal clear goals. And I don't mean just goals. That word is almost so overused between soccer and hockey and football and everything else. It's just so overused. So write down, raise your hand if you have crystal clear pathways in your life. Okay. So only 20 people of the 100 raised their hand. So then they said, okay, of the 20 of you that have these pathways in your mind, how many of you have them clearly written down somewhere? Only 4 people raised. So 4 of 100. But here's the worst stat of all. They said, okay, of the 4 of you remaining, how many of you have these pathways posted somewhere where you see them multiple times a day? 1 person. And they followed those people for another 10 years. And that 1 person made 9 times more money than the rest of them in that time period. So if it is, and by the way, Paul, this requires no training. It's free. Okay. You have this already installed in your hard drive.
Oh, it's right there. Right? It's my note. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, why wouldn't you allow that magical, wonderful, invisible, industrious, almost undefinable power into your life to help you along? I mean, it's hard enough getting out of bed and going and do your job and eating with your family and paying your bills and all that other stuff. Why wouldn't you invite this mysterious power into your life to just power you along? Because the more people that you can get on your team, the better. And I just, for leaders, I say, you're the entrepreneur, and I get that. Fine. People have called me an entrepreneur. I kind of wince at that because I'm like, here's a crayon and a piece of paper, draw entrepreneur for me. I mean, it doesn't mean anything. It's just a concept. But if you're that entrepreneur person, surround yourself with intrapreneurs,
Mhm.
INTRA, who will drive your company with and for you, and then just get out of their way. But the way that starts is by knowing what they all want and what the brochure looks like in their life for each and every one of them.
Totally. I mean, these are concepts that have been around, hidden in plain sight, but from the 1930s, when you're talking about Norman Vincent Peale, Dale Carnegie, most of like a Think and Grow Rich, Interview with the Devil, all these guys, these don't drift. The number of people that drift through life, they drift
Right.
aimless. And then all of a sudden, somebody like you comes up and says, so what are you actually doing with your life? Oh, well, Now, the best thing you said is right at the beginning here was you said you were an involuntary life coach, especially to young people. Now, if you're coming along with your background in blue collar work, the first reaction many people are going to have is, well, you should go to college, son, get a real job. You don't want to be out digging ditches or doing something. What you want to be is in a nice indoor job in the air conditioning, right? And frankly, my kids, I don't know. Both of them are going to go to college or university. I would imagine, though. They're starting with apprenticeships here quite heavily. I would be more than happy if my son or daughter leaned into a trade, picked up being an electrician or a tradesperson, and had to struggle by on 200,000 or 300,000 a year,
Yeah. Yeah. Well, it's interesting that you say that because the stats, I did a lot of research for the book Blue Collar Cash, and the stats are funny on college. People don't get this. So 4 out of 10 kids today go into college not knowing why they're going.
Yeah.
That's scary. Now, 25% of college entrants change their degree in the first 2 years. That's scary and wasteful. But the worst one is this. Only a third of kids that graduate with a degree ever use that degree ever. Now, if that was a business, if that was a business, the CEO would be fired. The place would go bankrupt. They'd have to sell off the parts. I mean, it is the most inefficient system in the world, unless you know exactly why you're going.
Yeah.
I want to study medicine. I want to help people. I want to be a doctor. I'm going to go to med school. When I'm done, I'm going to be a doctor. That's a direct line. Love it. Go there all day long. Do it. Lawyer, doctor, nurse, teacher, financial person, engineer, architect, whatever. But if you're just going to go, there's a whole lot of better ways to think about this. And by the way, you just said something that is really important. You have 2 kids. In the United States today, there's 167 million people considered full unemployment. 77 million of those people, and I added them up myself, Bureau of Labor Statistics, 77 million of those people to this day still do something with their hands. So half the population is in some type of trade, skill, or something involving their hands. So it almost stands to reason that one of your 2 children might just naturally be one of those type of people. Okay. They might learn tactily. They might be better with their hands than they are, with some theoretical scenario. So all I'm saying is before you start pumping 40,000 a year or 50,000 a year into a college degree, which is 200,000 after 4 years, hopefully you didn't borrow them.
Yeah.
Well, you can jump right into a trade right now and make $60,000, $70,000 a year after 4 years. That's 200,000 on the positive side.
Mm-hmm.
That's a $400,000 swing by the time you're 23 years of age. To put that on a kid, I mean, you got to really be careful and at least think about this before you jump into the herd mentality.
I know, I'm sorry, you just nailed it there. That's it. You don't think about it. You're not meant to think about it. You're not supposed to think about it. You're supposed to do what you're told.
Correct.
You're supposed to sit down, shut up, learn this, go to the next thing, sit down, do the exams, shut up, go to the next thing, and then you go and work at Mickey D's trying to ask if you want fries with that because your degree, your master's degree in Scandinavian studies, he says, speaking from experience, turns out to be damn all use. Well, that's not quite true. I did eventually find use for it, but oh my goodness! So the value of the manual, the trade, the thing that actually adds value or creates value, rather than moving things around, which I think is the difference. You can't outsource that.
Well, and the other thing is this. I mean, what people don't realize about working outside or working with your hands is there's this thing that I think I invented this statement. It's called the stand back moment. And what that means is at the end of the day, and I did this because I was a landscaper working on $1 million houses back 40 years ago. When you get to stand back and lean on your shovel, and look at these beautiful things that you've created, beautiful rock gardens with pine trees and fish ponds. And I mean, you get to see this amazing stuff you created. And I don't care whether you're, creating a beautiful wrought iron fence for someone, or you're doing a stone outdoor kitchen, or whatever you're doing. You get to stand back at the end of the day and say, wow, I did that. I created that with my own two hands, and that will stand the test of time. I can come back in 100 years and that thing will be here. And I just don't think you get that on the 15th floor in some cubicle, selling medical supplies and wondering how you fit into the world,
Yeah.
So it really bothers me when people think, and by the way, it's unfortunately, and I wrote an open letter to parents on my website at kenrusk.com. I said, listen, I get it. I'm a parent. You birthed your child. You put your child in diapers. You clothed them. You fed them. You sheltered them. You taught them what you could. You protected them as well as you could. And now, for some reason, you think the only way to say, wow, I was a successful parent, is if they have an expensive college degree on the wall. That has never been true in the history of our economy. It's just never been true. So I say, isn't the ultimate goal an independent, problem-solving, financially savvy, financially independent, in control, wholesome human being? Isn't that really the goal? Not just an overly educated one. So I think parents have to stop and go, yeah, you know what? Maybe my ego is the problem. Maybe I'm more worried about telling my friends that my son went to Vanderbilt or my daughter went to Ohio State. Maybe it's me that's the problem.
Yeah.
And you're unintentionally hurting your kids in 66% of the cases. So it really is something else.
Well, you think the number of kids that used to go to university, even when I went to university, which was 30 years ago, it wasn't that many. It wasn't half or 30%. It was like 10 or something like that. And you had, I did the humanities as well, which is kind of not so useful. But it was a small percentage. There were technical schools, there were polytechnics they had over here, which all of a sudden became universities because of the financial incentives. They were financially incentivized to start charging for them. I was one of the last students that got a loan, and I got a grant actually. So my entire college education was free from the state. So taxpayers paid for it. But now the colleges themselves are incentivized to charge you a ton of money they don't really care what you do after. There are ways you could flip that incentive round. Personally, I would say, fine, those fabulous endowments, you now have to raise money yourself and pay for those kids to come to you, and they'll pay it back to you. And if they don't pay it back to you, sucks to be you.
Right. Yeah.
There you go. Incentive problem solved. It's called skin in the game, baby. It's called skin in the game.
Right.
But let's go back to the thing that really matters, the individuals themselves. And you said two things that were fascinating. One is you alluded to personal satisfaction, and two was being in control. And I think the two of them are deeply related. People, I think, are taught that they're not in control. They just have to go with the flow, which means that they drift. They don't have this magical plan. And ergo, they never get the chance to be satisfied because they're not doing something that they plan and organize and create. They don't create their own life. They don't create as you said, a wrought iron fence or whatever it is. If you don't create, you don't build, where's your satisfaction?
Well, that's a great point. I mean, you're either happening to life or life is happening to you. And that's the big difference. Okay. I love it when I hear all the if-thens going on in the world, okay? If you go to high school and if you get good grades and if you get a scholarship and if you go to university and if you get a degree that you can use and if you get a job that pays well, guess what? Then you can start living your life. That's completely backwards. If you want to talk about control, have your young person or anybody for that matter, have them draw out exactly the type of house they'd like to live in, exactly the type of car they'd like to drive, exactly the type of vacations they like to take. Would they want a pet? And would it be a dog or a cat? What color? What would you name it? Okay. What type of charities would you give back? If I gave you $100 in cash and said, you have to give this away right now, what would you do with it? Your spiritual moment, your hobbies, your sports, your health, everything. If you could draw that brochure out, okay, and then you say, okay, cool, that's the way I want to live. I would love to, if I could live like that, that would be so cool. That would be my comfort, my peace, and my freedom. Then you've got the end game. It's like a puzzle. If I dumped 1,000 puzzle pieces on your dining room table right now, and I took the box away, you're done. You got no hope. I mean, unless you were in prison for 20 years, you have no hope of building this puzzle, right? So why aren't you living your life according to the box? Because without the box, you have nothing, right? You have a bunch of pieces strewn all over the place. How am I going to put these together? And if you get lucky, then you will live good. There's another if then, right?
Yeah.
I'm saying start with the puzzle box first, build how you want your life to look like first, and then pick one of the hundreds of different pathways to get. Because at the end of the day, and this is where I personally come in as a ditch digger, okay? I sometimes think it isn't so important what you do for a living as it is what you do with what you've done for a living. Meaning, how are you creating that puzzle box? How are you creating that picture for yourself? Because if you are in control of your input, your output, the quality of that output, your day, your time, your schedule, your financial gain, it doesn't always matter exactly what the substrate was. I mean, I could take this company here, which we dig ditches, and I could flip it to selling windows or selling medical parts or whatever. It's not necessarily the thing as much fun as it is, as much as it is what you create and the fun that you have creating your future with it. So yeah, I would say we are in a hell of a lot more control than we think we are. We just have to start with the why. And then all of a sudden, all those little entrepreneurial characteristics that I talk about in the book, persistence, resilience, faith, hope, courage, initiative, vision, charity, humility, all those things, generosity, those things all come out in us when we have a reason why. We just have to get that out there first and then let that take our life in directions that can be wholly beneficial.
And I think invariably the money looks after itself in most cases.
It does, because when you have your eyes on what, again, the pink Volkswagen, when you have your eyes on that thing, your body, your brain will find a way to go get that. I've done it in my own life so many times, whether it's cars I've acquired or golf courses I wanted to play or the boats that I have or whatever it might be, places I wanted to go. When I honed in on it, they ended up showing up in my life. And you could call that some type of law of attraction, but I think it's an actual physical, scientific thing that your brain does, which kicks your body into motion to go make those things happen.
I think it's the difference between, it's like Yoda's thing, do or do not, there is no try. It's decide to do something. You choose to do something. Saying, I choose to do this. I decide to. It's not, I think I will. I might consider.
Yeah.
I was talking to my kid. I was talking to my daughter about this just a few days ago. And by the way, if you're listening, darling, your room's a mess. But listen to this man. He's really, really smart. Okay? And you, boy, as well. The two of them. So yeah, this is one of the ones I'm going to play to the kids. They refuse to listen to anything else. But this is good.
There's a chapter in the book that has within it two clubs. One's called the 2-Day Club and one's called the Someday Club. Okay. And I described the 2-Day Club and the Someday Club like a golfing country club. So I kind of analogize it to that. And what they'll learn really quickly is that there's a whole lot of people in this world that just live at the Someday Club. They want you there. They don't want you to leave, because we can all commiserate about someday we're going to do something that just never happens. And I hope they draw the conclusion that someday never comes.
I could have been a contender. I could have been a contender.
Right, right.
Oh, it's magnificent. Can I give you 10,000 billboards and the biggest marker pen you can imagine?
Sure.
And on those billboards, you may write whatever it is you want to be seen by them.
Yeah.
What's going to be on it?
One of them is going to say, you and only you know what your life could look like. So why are you letting other people try to influence that?
That'll do. Where can we find you, Ken? We've got kenrusk.com.
Yeah, you can go to kenrusk.com. One of the things that I did that I'm really proud of, because it's working really great, is I made a 8-week simple course that you can use that references the book, Blue Collar Cash. It's not one of those $2,000 courses you see online. It's $179. You get a free book with it, and it's 8 45-minute sessions. And what it does is it forces you, instead of having a self-help book, to make my book a self-help book. So it will change the way you think this afternoon if you start it. I promise you. I guarantee you it will. And it's called The Path to a Successful Life. It follows the book. And so many people have taken the course and called me and said, man, I get it now. I now see, I got to get rid of all the noise and just put this in front of me, and my life's going to be good. So I encourage anyone out there to try it. I donate most of the money from those courses to charity anyway. My life was good before I wrote this book. And so, yeah, if you help yourself out, you'll be helping someone else at the same time. And I hope people check it out and tell me what they think of it.
Well, we'll make sure that the links to the website and to the course are in the description of these episodes. Lastly, it just remains for me to say, Ken Rusk, it's been an absolute pleasure. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Paul. Happy to come back anytime. Appreciate it.